Please give them a warm welcome and a round of applause for you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of the one, the infinitely good, the all-merciful. Beautiful music, thank you. As I'm standing in front of you, there's something that permeates every fiber of my being. Informs me, be it my mind's neurons, my heart's neurons, my gut's neurons. It guides me, and yet it might be invisible to you and to your eyes. And that is the experiences and the times that I've spent with my grandparents. 2 grandmas and 1 grandpa. The other grandpa left his body before I was born. And those moments, those times, those experiences, there's this beautiful transmission happening effortlessly into this, little boy's body and mind. And I can still feel that inside of me. There is no karmic noise that exists between grandparents and grandchildren. So then, modeling happens without modeling. Teaching happens without talking. And nothing but love and presence exists. And those teachings, I was too young to intellectualize, but still, what happened is grok. You know what grok means? Like getting something on a cellular level. And that was planted in me for those seeds to blossom later in life. Additionally, at the same time, what is informing every fiber of my being, without which I wouldn't be here, is the wisdom of the elders. And for me are the mystics, the saints, the prophets. The elders in the community, my mother's aunt, my great aunt, who was just a manifestation of beauty and the presence of God and sweetness and compassion. And all of that exists inside of me, just like it exists inside of you, as I invite you to just contemplate that as you're hearing me. The only way that I could forget this reality is to ignore it. And the only way that I can remember it is to be honest, humble, practice gratitude, and recognize the interconnectedness of all that surrounds me. And of course, to choose not to be a narcissistic, entitled God to myself. Michael Meade says, the elders are those who have found ways to accept the hand that fate has dealt to them. By virtue of that, they also find the paths of genuine meaning and purpose that make life truly rich and make death the middle of a long life. It is the elder within us that understands that we must die before we die in order to truly live. So here we see that elder is not necessarily connected to getting older. And I'll speak to that in just a second. That essence of wisdom exists in us regardless of our age, our physiology. For those of you who have taken the Rumi course or the clients and coaches that I work with around this, we know that when we work with the dimensions of the heart, not the hallmark heart, not the heart of just emotion, not the sentimentalities, but the vast and infinite heart, which we begin with the physical one in the core of our being, we know that the back of the heart is the portal for wisdom, for ancestors, for mystics, for grandparents that are no longer with us, for wisdom to come through. And this is why either when someone places their hand on the back of your heart, you feel some tenderness, you release, especially when something's stuck or you're sad. And at the same time, it could really trigger you, depending on how hardened it is or how soft and available it is. But because we only look this way, and now we look at a screen that looks that way, creating a world that nothing but just me and my image exists. And it's going to get worse than it's ever been because of our gadgets. We're not in this body, we're not in this space to even pay attention to the back of our hearts. We're literally and spiritually is where the wisdom comes through. Is where that ever-presence wisdom and teaching of all the beings that have come before us come through, including those that still exist, if we pay attention. Michael Meath further says that in the old wisdom traditions, elders act as a living bridge between the visible, measurable world and the mostly unseen realms of spirit and soul. So, when we learn not to honor the wisdom within, no matter who you are, what age you are, when the attention is outwardly, not much can happen. But when the attention is faced, kind of turned around, and you spend some time here, in your heart and in your being and in your spirit, you begin to recognize the inner wisdom, recognize the inner elder, recognize the inner heart. But when we don't honor it, when we don't pay attention to it, it reflects and mirrors back into our external world. And it manifests as a disregard, a lack of appreciation for wisdom and knowledge, as well as for experience and insight. Wisdom, knowledge, experience, and insight. I can only have appreciation for that when I am in touch with my own experiences and insights, and my own knowledge through experience that gains into the wisdom that I have. And when I am not in touch with that, I cannot expect to recognize that outside of me. Be it in my peers, my parents, my grandparents, my teachers, who make very little money, right? I mean, look at our world is very telling. People, like doctors make a lot of money. I mean, naturally and rightfully. But then if someone is working with something that is invisible, like kind of teaching something that is invisible, but it has worth, we don't value that, and we don't pay them as much. But a plastic surgeon makes a lot of money, because that's what we value. And one of the forms of not honoring is not honoring those who have these experiences. This becomes easier and more problematic, again, in this egocentric, narcissistic, and entitled world that we've created. And these words are strong words, but they are reality. We have to look at them. I'm choosing these words very carefully, because it's very connected to appreciating or not appreciating the eldership inside of ourselves or in the other outside, be it from the past or from the present. We're too busy honoring ourselves, but without any measures, mirrors, validations, or authorities to confirm and affirm. This not only ensures a lack of creating future elders in our society, but also manifests as a total disregard. The secular world completely ignores youth and denies it its rites of passage, while materialism sells as a fountain of youth. And at the same time, it denies the elders and places them out of sight because they do not fit the image that we have been sold, the fountain of youth, which is extremely external, materialistic, surface level, shallow way of looking at the world. And we are sold that again and again and again, to the point that we even look at spirituality from a very materialistic way. Sadly, modern society and modern science is so busy with elongating our age to make sure that we become older and older and older, to live longer and longer, which is wonderful. Who's complaining? But who cares about us becoming wiser and wiser and wiser and wiser? Who outside of us can do that for us? Who outside of us can model that for us? Who outside of us cares for that? And thus, yet few seem to ripen into elders or blossom into wisdom, and most seem unable to harvest knowledge from life experiences in order to pass it on to those coming along. How are we sold this fountain of youth? How are we sold these images? Well, it started by glossary images on glossary paper in magazines, and then later in commercials and TVs, and everything that we are surrounded by. Sounds simple, but it has shaped who we are, and then it has shaped our culture and society as a whole. We were led astray, which has grown into such a massive monster that it takes a lot to reveal. But how are we going to get there? So those are some of the problems of not being disconnected to wisdom and being disconnected to those who embody these important aspects. We don't appreciate experience. So there's a double bind here that as we're moving forward and we're not appreciating these things inside of us and in the other, we are not cultivating elders in our society. So more people are becoming older, but not elder. So it begets itself, right? And it beautifully mirrors because we don't create room for that which we don't want or need or appreciate. So where does it start? How can we do this? How can we open the back of our hearts and allow our ancestors, mystics, saints, wise beings, connected or not connected to us biologically, to run through us and have their breath come through us and inform us and wake us up from this self-centered way of being. And at the same time, how can we inspire, discover, develop, and cultivate that in our surroundings and look for it outside of us and inspire those who are ahead of us biologically to take that responsibility and accountability, for there will be a time that they will need to sit and guide and inform. But when that is not there, there is no inspiration to get there. And then I'll just worry about how to get older and how to make sure I live longer. And it all becomes just this body that I was loaned as a clothing, which then I have to just give back in a moment of death because it's a loaned clothing. And I just spent my whole life taking care of that. While the one inside went unseen by myself and everyone around me. We have to realize that we are interconnected. It sounds easier than actualize. We need to start to situate the elders in the right places in our society. We need to challenge the entire retirement concept. We need to question so many things, and we need to challenge them constantly, not through arguments and debates, but by creating actual activities, places and spaces for elders to share their wisdom, whether in the kitchen away from everyone else's eyes, or only happens between the grandparent and grandchildren, and families ensuring that their children are surrounded by their grandparents as much as possible. Because that is where we get to learn and appreciate that those who are older may know more. You see, in other cultures called the polite culture, like you rise in the presence of someone that is older than you. You don't speak too loud. You could be at a grocery store and someone's just a few years older. You have respect for that. Now that is, to us, maybe that looks like some form of, formalities or kind of like some mindless gesture. Or we might go too much into psychology and go like, well, why? Who are they? But it's not for them, it's for you. It's something that comes from inside of you. To situate yourself in the right place. It doesn't belittle you when you respect or bow to someone who's a little bit older than you. It is cultivating something beautiful inside of you. But the reason we don't do that is because, well, we don't respect people that are older than us. Because we don't respect experience, we don't respect wisdom. And then we judge people by their form and what they say. And we don't even see in them the dormant wisdom, let alone to inspire it out of them. Does that make sense? Are you following me? Okay. So we need to invite our elders into our communities, into our shared places, and provide opportunities for them to share. So we begin with our own children or even ourselves. If we have grandparents or not, or we have them but they're far, there are plenty of them in our communities. There are plenty of them in our neighbors. There are plenty of people here, even at Althea here. We can create a group where of all ages, we can call it, like Reb Zalman called it, saging and aging. With all ages we come and we start to share our wisdom and experiences. To break that veil, to break those layers that have isolated us in our neighborhoods or isolated us even in communities. To break away what these terminology mean on the surface only. That elder means older, or elders are like the shamans, or the chiefs of the tribe, something you read in the history books. There are plenty of them in this room that whoopie-doo we don't tap into, right? So, what's the point of honoring life or getting really excited about life, which is wonderful, or fight for it, which is wonderful, if we can't appreciate subtle things that exist, that is inside of us? So we can also read about these things, read people like Reb Zalman, read people like Michael Meade, who really talk about these subjects, about how to age, how to sage, what is an elder, what are ancestors, how can we feel them, how can we be with them. And then we have to remember You may ask how? Well, we remember by practicing gratitude. Gratitude is another very important practice, without which pretty much everything can go unnoticed in minutes. So how do we practice gratitude? We pause. We intentionally pause. We acknowledge the interconnectedness. We reflect that everything we do, everything we know, there were other beings that were involved, without which I wouldn't know it. That's why as a teacher myself, like I get a card 20 years later saying, my entire life was changed by you. Like, oh, okay, that was 20 years I didn't know. Right? So what does that mean? That means the real education, the real love, the real exchange doesn't come with instant gratitude. Doesn't come with an instant kind of affirmation. It's invisible. It's something that is rooted and is exchanged from a heart to another heart. You can't put your finger